Chapter 6 covers the next energy-yielding nutrient, which is protein. Protein is a little bit misunderstood to some extent. Often we think of protein primarily being necessary to build muscle, which, yes, indeed it is. However, there are other areas within the body which rely on protein. It's necessary for protein to form antibodies, enzymes, neurotransmitters, hormones, as well as other compounds. We'll also take a look in this chapter at food sources of protein and see how it is present in both animal as well as plant products. The word protein comes from Greek, meaning prime importance. After we review the many body functions and structures which require it, you'll see how protein does earn this designation. The basic composition of protein includes carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, the same atoms which make up carbohydrate and fat, but it also includes nitrogen. It's the nitrogen atom which gives the name amino, which refers to nitrogen containing, to the amino acids that make up the links in protein chains. These amino acids are often referred to as the building blocks of protein. Each amino acid has an amino group, an acid group, as well as a hydrogen atom. Also attached is a side group, and it's the side group that makes each amino acid unique or actually distinguishes one from another. Proteins are made up of about 20 different amino acids, each with a different side group. The way that these amino acids are sequenced together, as well as what their side group may be, determines not just the shape, but also the function. Will this protein that's being synthesized be a hormone? Will it be an antibody? Will it be an enzyme? Here you can see the typical amino acid structure. All amino acids have that central carbon with an amino group attached, an acid group, as well as a hydrogen. Then there is also that critical side group. And remember, it's that side group that's unique that actually differentiates one amino acid from another. These examples of amino acids show how different those side groups can be. The simplest amino acid, glycine, has a hydrogen atom as its side group. The slightly more complex amino acid, alanine, has an extra carbon with 3 hydrogen atoms attached. Other amino acids have even more complex side groups, as you can see here with aspartic acid as well as phenylalanine. Once again, even though amino acids share a common structure, they differ greatly as far as the side group composition. Amino acids are divided up into one of two categories. They are either essential or non-essential. Essential amino acids are those that the body cannot make. So they must be provided from the protein that we're consuming from our diet. Often these essential amino acids are also referred to as being indispensable. Non-essential amino acids, however, are the ones that the body can actually synthesize for itself. Proteins in foods can deliver these non-essential amino acids, but it's not necessary that they do so. Our body has the capability of making these non-essential amino acids as long as there is nitrogen present, combining with fragments that can be obtained from carbohydrate or fat. Amino acids are linked in a variety of sequences to form multiple different proteins. The acid end of one amino acid connects with an amino end of another, forming what's known as a peptide bond. This occurs through a condensation reaction, which is the same type of reaction that we looked at when glucose units bound together to form disaccharides or polysaccharides. It was the same type of reaction that would bind fatty acids together to form triglyceride. Also, with this condensation reaction, in addition to the new molecule being created, there will also be water being synthesized. When two amino acids are bonded together, they are referred to as a dipeptide. 3 bonded together is a tripeptide. 4 to 9 amino acids bonded together are referred to as oligopeptides. Greater than 10 are referred to as polypeptides. And in general, most polypeptides contain about a few dozen to several hundred amino acids bonded together in a chain. Polypeptides are large protein molecules, often having a very complicated structure. They may have a lot of twisting, turning, folding, and tangling involved in the structure itself. These unique shapes allow the protein, though, to perform various tasks within the body, which can include storage, transport, structure, among others. Because of this complicated structure, however, many polypeptides are very sensitive to physical or environmental changes. These changes can alter the overall stability of the polypeptide, leading to a process which is known as denaturation. Denaturation is defined as the change of protein structure and possible loss of function due to physical factors. These physical factors or environmental factors can include exposure to heat, changes in pH, exposure to alcohol, heavy metals, as well as other substances. This process occurs with both body proteins as well as food proteins. As the stability in the complex structure is affected, the protein uncoils and starts to lose not only its shape but its function. Past a certain point, denaturation is irreversible for these proteins. An example of denaturation in the body occurs when protein is digested. When protein passes to the stomach, the presence of stomach acid starts to uncoil the protein strand, altering the shape and stability of the long polypeptide. We'll take a further look at this occurrence when we focus on the digestion of protein further in the lecture. Other examples of denaturation can include the hardening of an egg. When cooked, this occurs because the heat being applied is altering the makeup of the protein strand present in the egg. In this example, the liquidy egg turns to a solid form, once again because the protein strand has been denatured. If an acidic substance is added to milk, it will cause curdling. This is due to the acid, once again, altering the shape of the protein which is present. The physical whipping of egg whites also alters the stability of the protein strand. This again will change the liquidy type of an egg to a more lighter, almost gaseous component as the chemical makeup of the polypeptide changes from the physical force. Two examples of polypeptides that are body proteins include hemoglobin and insulin. Hemoglobin, when we take a look at this molecule, you'll see just how very complex it is. It includes 4 highly folded polypeptides. Insulin, on the other hand, is a lot less complex. It includes 2 very short polypeptides that are linked together. The function of hemoglobin is to transport oxygen to our cells and tissues. It's a very complex protein, or more specifically polypeptide, that has 4 highly folded chains with heme and iron attached. Every chain has a certain sequence of amino acids, which then determine the shape of the entire polypeptide molecule itself. So compare hemoglobin to insulin. Very, very different. Insulin, the hormone we discussed in Chapter 4, which is necessary to control blood glucose, is also a polypeptide. However, it's not as complex as hemoglobin. It simply has two short chains which are linked together. So these two examples of hemoglobin and insulin show how polypeptides can differ greatly in their structure as well as composition. Moving on, let's take a look at the digestion and absorption of protein. The protein that we consume from food does not become body proteins directly. The protein that we eat needs to be broken down in our GI tract, eventually into individual amino acids. These amino acids then can be used to make certain body proteins, possibly again neurotransmitters, hormones, antibodies, and so forth. So let's take a look at how this process occurs. Protein digestion begins in the stomach. The presence of stomach acid, or more specifically hydrochloric acid, starts to denature the protein strand. It uncoils the protein and allows the enzymes that are present to start the digestive process. Pepsinogen and pepsin are enzymes present in the stomach that are key to this process, which allows polypeptides to be cleaved into smaller units. When these smaller polypeptides enter the small intestine, specialized enzymes are present which can break them down or digest them further. Proteases and peptidases work to continue this process until eventually single amino acids remain. It's these single amino acids then which are then absorbed and can eventually be used to make the new body proteins. Take a few moments and use this slide to follow the route of protein through the GI tract. Here you can review the important areas of the stomach and small intestine which are involved in the digestive and absorptive processes of this particular nutrient. Single amino acids are absorbed by intestinal cells through active transport. They will then be used by these cells as a source of energy or used to synthesize other necessary compounds. Amino acids that are not used by intestinal cells are going to be sent to the liver, which will then determine how these amino acids will be used. Once we have these single amino acids now being available after the process of digestion and absorption, what happens next? Well, they are now used to synthesize body proteins. This synthesis depends on two factors: having a diet that provides adequate protein as well as all of the essential amino acids, and also our genetic information, or our genes. The instructions for making every body protein are transmitted by genetic information which is received at conception. These instructions are found in our DNA, which is located within the nucleus of every cell. The DNA never leaves the nucleus. Instead, it transcribes what is known as a template, and this is designated as being messenger RNA. And this contains all the necessary information to make body proteins. The messenger RNA does leave the nucleus, and then it attaches itself to the ribosome of the cell. Here it has the specific sequence of amino acids necessary to line up to synthesize a specific body protein. Another form of RNA, called transfer RNA, then goes out into the cellular fluid and collects the specified amino acids, brings them back to the messenger RNA, and they line up in the specific sequence. Once they're there in that specific sequence, they are then bound together by enzymes to form a brand new protein strand. Take a few moments here and review this slide, which provides a visual description of this protein synthesis process. The sequence of amino acids in each individual protein determines not just its shape, but also its specific function. If there is an error in the amino acid sequence, the result is going to be an altered protein being made. And sometimes this can occur with major consequences. The protein hemoglobin offers a specific example of such a genetic variation. In a person who has sickle cell anemia, 2 of hemoglobin's 4 polypeptide chains have the normal sequence of amino acids, but the other 2 chains do not. And in the next slide, we'll take a closer look at the specific makeup. Because of this single alteration, it changes the characteristics and shape of the hemoglobin protein, so much so that it loses its ability to carry oxygen effectively. What also occurs is that the red blood cell collapses from its normal round disc shape into a crescent shape, or what's referred to as a sickle shape. People who do have this genetic variation leading to sickle cell anemia can have the potential effects of bursting of the red blood cells, abnormal blood clotting, increased infections, as well as severe pain in the abdomen as well as joints. If we look at the amino acid sequencing of a normal red blood cell versus a sickle cell, what you'll see is that there is just one amino acid which is out of order. The normal hemoglobin sequence includes valine, histidine, leucine, threonine, proline, glutamic acid, and glutamic acid. The amino acid sequence of sickle cell hemoglobin is the same, with the exception of in the place of where glutamic acid should be, valine is now sequenced. This one variation is what then causes the synthesis of a sickle-shaped red blood cell. Again, this occurs due to a genetic issue or a variation when it comes to synthesizing this specific body protein, which is hemoglobin. So far, we've reviewed how proteins are synthesized, but let's take a closer look at the functions of some of these body proteins. Protein helps to form building blocks of structural components within the body. These include muscle, blood, skin, bone, teeth, tendons, membranes, and more. A few body proteins to note which are necessary to support these structures include collagen, actin, and myosin. There are many hormones with various functions within the body, and some of these hormones are actually proteins. In Chapter 4, we discussed insulin and glucagon, both hormones, but they are body proteins, which help to regulate blood glucose. Other hormones, which are also proteins, include estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, growth hormone, as well as the others that are listed on this particular table. Some proteins act as enzymes. One example are digestive enzymes, which are involved in being able to break down and utilize food as a source of energy. Enzymes not only break down substances, but they also build up. An example would be bone formation. Enzymes can also transform one substance into another, as what occurs with amino acids being transformed into glucose. Breaking down types of reactions are referred to being catabolic, whereas building up reactions are referred to as being anabolic. Proteins function as regulators of fluid balance. Normally, proteins are found within cells and in plasma. During times of illness or protein malnutrition, protein leaks out of the blood vessels into the space between cells. This in turn causes water to be attracted to these leaking proteins, which in turn causes fluid accumulation, swelling, as well as edema. Proteins are also important as acid-base regulators. Normal body processes continually produce acids and bases, which the blood carries to the kidneys and lungs for excretion. By accepting and releasing hydrogen ions, proteins can also act as buffers, maintaining the acid-base balance of the blood and body fluids. Maintaining blood pH within its necessary range is critical. Outside of this range, the denaturation of proteins can occur, leading to loss of function of specific proteins and possibly resulting in even coma or death. Body proteins are also transporters. They play a very important role in allowing lipids or fats, vitamins, minerals, and oxygen to pass through cell membranes. They can act basically as pumps, allowing these components or these compounds to transfer from one side of the cell to the other. Proteins also defend the body against disease in the form of antibodies. Antigens or foreign invaders such as bacteria and viruses often attack and enter cells. When the body detects these invading antigens, it manufactures antibodies, which are giant protein molecules designed specifically to fight against them. Antibodies also help to provide immunity to fight more quickly if exposed to the same antigen a second time. Protein can also serve as a source of energy and glucose. While the body prefers not to utilize protein in this manner, it will occur, however, if carbohydrate intake is inadequate or during times of fasting or starvation. The body will turn to its own tissue protein or muscle mass to make the amino acids available for energy or glucose production. This occurs through a process known as gluconeogenesis. In this way, protein can help to maintain blood glucose levels, but it's at the expense of losing lean body tissue or lean muscle mass. For this type of a step to occur, the amino acid must first be deaminated, meaning that it must be stripped of its nitrogen. This deamination process, or the removal of nitrogen from the amino acid, can be seen here. The amino group is removed, resulting in the production of ammonia and a keto acid. This keto acid can actually be reused to produce a non-essential amino acid. Now, this keto acid is not the same as a ketone or a ketone body, which was discussed in previous chapters. Ketones are produced from the metabolism of fatty acids during fasting or low carbohydrate intake. Keto acids are produced from this process of deamination of an amino acid. As noted, deamination produces ammonia, and ammonia is a toxic compound which can alter the acid-base balance of the blood. To prevent such an event from occurring, the liver will combine ammonia with carbon dioxide to make urea, which is considered to be a much less toxic type of a compound. While urea is much less of a toxic compound than ammonia, it still needs to be excreted, and this occurs through the kidneys. Adequate fluid is necessary to both dilute and excrete urea. Since urea production increases with a high protein intake, extra fluid should be consumed. Inadequate fluid consumption causes the body to use its own stores, increasing the risk of dehydration. Seeing now how important dietary protein is in allowing the body to take amino acids and synthesize new body proteins, it's understandable that protein deficiency then can cause health issues. But what about too much protein? What we'll see is how excess amounts of this particular nutrient can also have health implications. First, let's take a look at potential health issues associated with consumption of excess protein. Heart disease. Studies have shown that foods high in animal protein are often high in saturated fat. And if you recall from Chapter 5, there is a strong link with consuming saturated fat and increasing the risk of heart disease. Plant proteins, however, as well as lean meats and fish, combined with low-fat dairy, is more associated with decreasing the risk of heart disease. Another connection is with homocysteine, which is an amino acid produced by the body. Large amounts of this amino acid have been connected with high meat consumption. Studies in turn have shown that high homocysteine levels may increase the production of free radicals, oxidative stress, and body inflammation, which in turn can affect blood vessels and artery walls. In contrast to homocysteine, there's another amino acid, arginine, which may help decrease the risk. This occurs by having the potential to lower blood pressure and decreasing the risk of blood clots. Arginine is found naturally in foods such as turkey, chicken, pumpkin seeds, lentils, chickpeas, among others. The potential connection with protein and cancer. Protein does not seem to increase the risk of cancer, but certain protein-rich foods may. Studies have shown that red meat and processed meats have been associated with increasing the risk, specifically of colon, pancreatic, and ovarian cancer. In contrast, legumes and fish may lower the potential risk. As far as chronic diseases, we'll explore the connection between diet and specific ones more fully in Chapter 18. Another connection to address is adult bone loss, or what we refer to as osteoporosis. Studies have shown that high dietary protein may increase calcium excretion. Calcium, as you know, is the mineral necessary for bone calcification. Whether excess protein depletes the bones of this necessary mineral may depend more upon the adequacy of calcium in the diet. So it's really inconclusive whether the issue is too much protein or is it too little calcium. Is there a connection between excess dietary protein and weight gain? Well, it depends on a few factors. If high protein foods are providing excess total calories, then there is the potential for weight gain. Consuming any energy-yielding nutrient over and above caloric needs will be converted into body fat. And this occurs more often when the excess protein is in the form of animal-based versus plant proteins. However, if high dietary protein intake is coupled with exercise, especially weight training, resistance training, the weight gain there will more likely be from muscle mass increase. The last condition to address is kidney disease. The excretion of the end products of protein breakdown, protein metabolism, ultimately is urea. And urea, if you recall, needs to be excreted through the kidneys. Adequate fluid and healthy kidneys, therefore, are important for this process. A high protein intake increases the work of the kidneys, but it does not cause kidney disease. It may, however, accelerate kidney deterioration in people who are already diagnosed with chronic kidney disease. In this case, this population often may have to reduce their overall protein intake. In the United States, as well as other developed countries, there is more of an issue with the possible health effects from too much protein compared to too little. However, even within industrialized nations, there are certain populations who are at a greater risk of developing a protein deficiency. These groups can include those who have a chronic illness, burn victims, cancer patients, those with AIDS, the elderly, as well as those with eating disorders. What are the possible health effects that can occur with inadequate protein intake or protein deficiency? Well, think about all the body proteins we learned about in this chapter. Without adequate dietary protein, the synthesis of body proteins will break down to provide cells with necessary amino acids. Some of these body proteins, again, enzymes, neurotransmitters, hormones, antibodies, they will all be compromised. Without these body proteins being available to perform critical roles, many functions or activities within the body will slow down or completely stop. Some of the potential consequences of inadequate protein or protein deficiency may include muscle wasting, anemia, delayed wound healing, edema, as well as infection. So how much protein should we be consuming? First, consider that the body cannot store proteins or amino acids to a large extent. Dietary protein is the only source of essential amino acids. Remember that term essential? That's a nutrient that the body cannot make, so it must be obtained from food. Dietary protein is also a source of nitrogen, which can be used to synthesize non-essential amino acids, as well as other nitrogen-containing compounds. Based on the DRIs, or the dietary reference intakes, we've looked so far at recommendations for carbohydrate, which was 45 to 65% of our total calories, fat, 20 to 35% of our total calories, leaving protein to provide us with about 10 to 35% of our total calories or energy intake. In a 2,000 calorie diet, that would be equivalent to about 50 to 175 grams of protein per day. For healthy adults, there is an RDA which has been established, and it is 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Because the RDA is designed to meet the needs for replacing worn-out tissue, it increases for larger people. It also meets the needs for building new tissue, which occurs during growth periods. So it increases for infants, children, adolescents, and it will also increase for women who are pregnant or who are lactating. Dietary protein is derived from both animal and plant sources. In the United States, as well as other developed countries, about 65% of the protein we consume comes from animal sources. In comparison, in developing countries, only about 20 to 30% of protein comes from animal sources, with a much larger amount being provided by plants. While large consumption of animal protein may have some adverse health effects that we noted previously, a positive is that these sources are complete proteins, meaning that they provide us with all essential amino acids. These essential amino acids then can be used to make the necessary body proteins. Most animal-based proteins, which include meat, poultry, fish, eggs, dairy, provide us with about 7 grams per serving. Plant sources are usually incomplete proteins, meaning that they don't provide all of the essential amino acids. However, there are some exceptions. Soybeans, quinoa, hemp seed, chia, buckwheat, and spirulina do contain all of the essential amino acids. For one who is following a plant-based diet, eating combinations of different protein sources will also help furnish all of the necessary amino acids to synthesize body proteins. Plant-based protein can provide anywhere from about 2 to 7 grams per serving. The one plant-based food group to note that doesn't provide a significant amount of protein are the fruits. The last topic to address is the use of protein and amino acid supplements. The average American consumes about 80 grams of protein per day. Therefore, protein supplements are usually not necessary if one is consuming a balanced diet. However, if someone is trying to work on building muscle, taking protein supplements without putting in the work will not be beneficial. To build muscle, muscles need to be consistently worked. Knowing that the body builds muscle from amino acids, many athletes and fitness enthusiasts take protein powders soon after a workout, which includes weight training or resistance training. While these powders may not improve overall athletic performance, they may actually have some effect on promoting protein synthesis and muscle strength. Whey protein in particular has been shown to be associated with some benefits. We'll actually discuss this concept further in chapter 14. But what happens if excess protein is consumed, either as a supplement or a powder, past the point where the body can use it for muscle synthesis? Well, some of the excess will be used as an energy or calorie source, or it will also be converted to fat. Something else to keep in mind is that protein powders eventually lead to increased production of urea, which in turn relies on adequate fluid for appropriate excretion through the kidneys. Lastly, what about single amino acid supplements? Single amino acids do not occur naturally in foods and have been identified as really having no benefit. The body is not designed to handle high concentrations or unusual combinations of certain amino acids. In fact, in the past, recommendations to take the single amino acids lysine and tryptophan in large amounts have led to adverse health effects. Large doses of amino acids in general can also have GI effects, which can include profound diarrhea. This occurs because excess water gets pulled into the GI tract as your body tries to dilute this hyperconcentration of amino acids. One popular supplement includes the branched chain amino acids. And studies have supported that when combined with weight training and consumed soon after exercise, branched-chain amino acids may actually support protein synthesis. While branched-chain amino acids are considered relatively safe, there are recommendations, however, by health organizations for an appropriate amount to consume.